Good morning, hello, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today for this IB Exchange hosted webinar with Generation Global. Feel free to, in the chat, introduce yourself, what you teach, where you teach. We're going to just give it a second here. We've got a lot of people joining, so just gonna keep admitting everybody in. My name is Laura Varlas. I work on the IB Exchange platform. I'm based here in Washington, D.C., and I am joined today by Lisa Petro, and she is the Education and Quality Lead Head at Generation Global, an education initiative with the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, which supports youth in becoming open-minded global citizens through intercultural dialogue. And dialogue is what we'll be talking about today. This is going to be applicable to all the IB programs. We're going to share a lot of practical resources, and we're also going to show you where you can find those on the IB Exchange platform as well. We are recording this session. Everybody who is registered for this session will have access to the recording via our Zoom hub. And also I will send an email later this week to everybody with follow-up links to the recording, to the resources, and also give you the link to the upcoming webinars that we have on the IB Exchange Zoom hub. And also the other thing I wanted to say before we get started is if you have questions as we're going along, we'll have time for a Q&A at the end, but also feel free to use the Q&A tab, which should be along the bottom bar of your Zoom page. It might be behind the three dots. But that really helps us keep track of the questions if they're all in one place. It's fine to put them in the chat. We just might miss them. So that's a little tip there. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa Petro.
Thanks, Laura, and hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am so excited to see so many educators from all over the world, from lots of different backgrounds, different subjects, different programs within the IB. That's exactly what we are hoping for, because the work I'm going to talk with you about today really has its greatest strength in diversity and interculturalism. And so that's not just about the people who participate, but also the backgrounds that we come from and the kind of interdisciplinary work that's possible when we all come together to collaborate. So very excited to be here. I'm based in New York, so it's morning for me. And I'm just gonna take a moment here to share my slides. Just give me 1 second. Apologies. Here we go. And if I can confirm, maybe someone, maybe Laura, if you can just say, yeah, that you can see my slides.
Yep, they're up. We can see them.
Perfect. That's great. All right. So as I mentioned, I'm here today to talk with you about the power of dialogue and how dialogue can really transform your classroom instruction. So what I hope to do today is to first touch a little bit about what dialogue is, so we have a common understanding, a common language. And then from there, we'll kind of look at, okay, so why is dialogue important, and how does that really align to being an IB educator? How does that align to the program that I teach in the IB, or maybe even the subject that I might be teaching or working with? And then I'm going to take some time to share with you some really exciting news, a series of courses that you can take on the IB Exchange at no cost, where you can find resources to use in your classroom and really bring dialogue into your teaching pedagogy. So that's what we are looking to cover today. So before I dig into all of that, just a little bit of background. And thank you, Laura, for the introduction and giving us a little top line information there about who I am. But just so that you know where I'm coming from, I am with a program called Generation Global. And our focus is really in enabling young people ages 13 to 17 to create those future skills, right? To have the knowledge, the skills and attitudes where they can become open-minded and active global citizens. And we do that specifically through intercultural dialogue. Now, for those of you in the audience who are saying, well, I don't work with 13 to 17, maybe I'm in PYP, or maybe I'm working with students who are a little bit older, that's okay. the things I'm going to share with you today are applicable across all of the various grade levels in that they can be modified. So some of the opportunities we have are live opportunities, video conferences, or online asynchronous dialogue spaces. Those we really keep to the 13 to 17-year-old bracket. But in terms of all of our lesson plans, in terms of the content that is in our professional development courses I'm going to share with you, all of that is applicable from K through 12. So please don't be disheartened, stick with it and listen for what is there for you. So just again, we're really looking at building global citizens through intercultural dialogue. And we've had a lot of success over the years. We've actually reached over 600,000 young people in over 40 countries since 2009. We've been doing this a long time. And we've been able to train over 15,000 educators from all different kinds of schools and learning communities, subjects, and backgrounds, and really support them in bringing dialogic teaching practices into their learning environment. And we do this with safe and engaging dialogue resources. So at the end of this session, Laura is going to help us to learn a little bit about the IB Exchange if you're not already familiar. We have a whole library of free downloadable activities on the IB Exchange that you can use with your students. We also offer live video conferences. So if you were to sign up on our platform, you would have access to a schedule to book your classes into conversations, dialogues with classrooms from all over the world on special topics, global topics. And then we also have something called the Ultimate Dialogue Adventure. And this is really our student direct opportunity. So teachers can use this as a teaching companion in the classroom, but young people, no matter where they are all over the world, can also book themselves into this online learning platform where they can take topics on global issues and they can also engage in asynchronous dialogue spaces with peers from all over the globe. So lots of exciting ways that we really get young people learning and practicing the skills of dialogue to build that global citizenship piece. All right. So what I'd like to do is just learn a little bit more about your own approaches to pedagogy in the classroom. And through that, kind of define or explore what dialogue actually is and how it relates to us. So what I've got is a series of 3 questions. And what I'd like you to do for each question is just select the most appropriate answer that relates to your teaching practice as it is. So Laura, if I could ask, would you be able to launch the first question?
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks. Great. So this first question here is, well, statement, I should say. When teaching students about an issue or new content, I prefer to, and then you've got these sentence stem here to complete. So when teaching students about an issue or new content, great. So looks like some people are thinking about it. It's great. Other people are jumping right in. They know exactly where they stand. And apologies for asking you to think on your feet so quickly about your teaching, your pedagogy, but I'm sure you have it at the ready. We're well into the school year. Okay, so we have quite a few people. We'll just take a few more minutes to see if we can get just about everybody answering. A few more seconds. Almost there. All right. Looks like slowly but surely we're going up, okay? All right, we have just about everyone, and it looks like we're slowing a little bit. So for the sake of maybe going forward, for those of you that are having to think about it, I appreciate that. You can always post in the chat as well. We're happy to read your response as well if you need a little more time. But perhaps we can just pause here since we have just about everybody and have a look at the results. So wonderful. When we have a look at the results, we can see we're kind of all over the board, but really split down two responses. So when teaching students about an issue or new content, most people prefer to engage students, to ask open-ended questions. So really get students inside of the content. And then we have about the other half that are looking to guide students to explore the why behind their answer. Few people have mentioned that they really prefer to focus on helping students solve the problem or find some kind of solution. So when we think about why we are getting young people engaged in the way we do with content, dialogue has a really close and important relationship to our personal why as a teacher. In this particular one, we're thinking about inquiry, and we're thinking about how do we get students engaged in inquiry, and why do we get students engaged in inquiry? And as teachers, sometimes we get them engaged because we really want them to solve an issue. But for many of us, the outcome isn't necessarily the reason we have them engaged in inquiry. We're actually looking at inquiry as for the sake of understanding, for knowing more about the content and the topic. It's a way in which we're not necessarily problem solving, but we're just digging so that we have a much more complete understanding of the content itself. Wonderful. Okay, let's do the next question.
I'm pulling it up.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So similar sentence stem, when introducing new material, I tend to, and so let's see where people land on this. So again, we're really starting to focus on our why. Why do we provide instruction or teach in the manner that we teach? What are we looking for there with students? And, you know, the thing I realized about this poll and is that it cuts off the response. I hope that's not what's happening for people answering the poll.
I think if they hover over it, they can see the full question.
Oh,
And they might also, yeah, they might also have a slightly different view than we do as hosts. Yeah.
perfect. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I was wondering, I'm like, but now that I hover over it, I can see it. Thank you. So this one, people are much quicker on the ready. So when introducing new material, what do we tend to do? Just about there. All right. And it looks like we've kind of slowed a bit. So we'll go ahead. I think we can close this one and have a look. Great. So again, we're sort of split down the middle for the most part on this. The majority of people here have said when they're introducing new material, they tend to relate the subject to real world examples or current events to encourage students to see its relevance beyond the classroom. So really talking about how do we make those connections outside of the the immediate content and place it into the real world. Then the other half responded that they create opportunities for students to connect the material to their own lives, their experiences or interests, helping them find personal meaning in the topic. So this is less about how does the content exist in the real world with or without me, but what does it look like in the real world? While for this particular response, it's about how does the content relate to me? What is that buy-in? Why should it be meaningful to me? And then a few people mention that they tend to focus mainly on the subject matter itself because they believe that understanding the content is the priority. And I recognize too that for some subject areas like maths, maybe, this is something that you really have to sort of drill down into that technical understanding. And so I do see that as a possibility. So we asked this question as it relates to dialogue because similarly, there's a reason we have this approach. When we're looking to take content and material, even if it is the technical subject matter, and make that personal connection, we're helping students to make meaning. We're helping them to see relevance in that content because we know that if the content is not relevant to us, there's a greater chance that we are going to forget that content, or we're going to sort of sideline that content as unimportant. So this again is really important for dialogue, right? When we're looking to kind of make meaning, we're using communication to make meaning. All right, I have one more for you to help us unpack some of the distinctions of dialogue. Thanks, Laura. And so this last prompt is when helping students develop new skills, I aim to, so this is a skills-based prompt. When helping students develop new skills, I aim to. Great. And these are a little bit more complicated. All right, so we've got lots of people jumping in, knowing where they stand on skills development. Excellent. Skills can always feel like that very sticky area, especially when we talk about subjects where there's a lot of technical skill and how we approach teaching that technical skill. All right. We're just slowing down a bit. We have just about everyone. We'll just go to 1.5 minutes and then we'll pause there. Okay, we have just about everyone. Great. So let's have a look. So when helping students develop new skills, again, kind of split down the middle, but the biggest one was teachers aim to focus on applying the skills in meaningful, complex ways that challenge students to think critically and make informed decisions. Excellent. Second to that, we have teachers guiding students to reflect on how those skills can transform their understanding of themselves and the world, encouraging personal growth and wisdom. And then coming in last, we have teachers that primarily ensure students master the specific skills needed for success in the course. Now, thank you for sharing this. When we think about skills, like I said, it kind of gets sticky. We sort of get stuck in this area where, sometimes regurgitation or lecture can sort of fall in, where it's students have to know how to do this thing. They have to repeat it in the proper pattern. And so that technical really overwhelms and overtakes the subject teaching. But we also want to make sure that students are learning skills that are transferable. And so when we use a word like transferable, we understand that context becomes a major driver of skills development. So we really want to give students the opportunity not just to master the skill set, but also to apply that in meaningful ways so they can go forward as adults and develop wisdom and apply those skills for transformation in lots of areas of their lives. And so this is another distinction that we can see as it relates to dialogue. Dialogue really is a set of technical skills, believe it or not, but those technical skills are used across a variety of contexts. So context is key. So we can go ahead and just stop sharing that. Thanks so much, everyone, for participating in that poll. And I hope that helped you to get a little bit of relatedness to the way in which you teach or you're focusing your teaching and dialogic pedagogy. So let me back up a little bit there and help draw some of those through lines. So dialogic pedagogy, first and foremost, is really a way in which we communicate with each other and the world to create mutual understanding and make meaning. So in all of those questions that I've asked you, we were really focusing on what do I do as an educator to ensure that I'm creating not only understanding of content, but mutual understanding, shared understanding about what that content is, what it means for me as an individual, and what it means for others, not only in my learning community, but also in the greater world. So different contexts. And it also then leads through that mutual understanding, an ability to really make meaning of that content. So it's not just about what I'm learning in my math class. It's really about what I'm learning in my math class, what it means to me, and what it means out in the world, what it means inside of different communities. So really that dialogic pedagogy is how we support young people in learning how to communicate with one another, with the world, and through the lens of that content that we're bringing to them, that knowledge base. And so from that, it becomes a key instructional strategy that you can use as an educator in any subject area. It becomes a key instructional strategy for engaging your learners in that content, in a topic, a lens, while they develop those core intercultural communication skills, which again, we really, through dialogue, want them to develop into wisdom and apply transferably to create change, whether it's social change or it's personal transformation in their own growth. So this is what dialogic pedagogy is, and there's so much more we can say about this and dig into, but I'm going to invite you at the end of this session to take some of our online learning modules to learn about, deeper about dialogue. So just to give you a little bit of background, what are those core skills we're talking about? Now let's get practical. Okay, great. Sounds wonderful. Making meaning, open-mindedness, mutual understanding, love it. But what are those skills that young people really need to have in order to meet some of those goals and outcomes? So at Generation Global, we have 5 core skills that educators can teach their learners, and learners can continue to practice over time to really build, deepen, develop these core skills. And this is not something you do once. This is not, we get into one conversation with a group of young people from another place in the world, and all of a sudden we know how to communicate interculturally. It doesn't work that way. We are not born necessarily with all of these skills intact, and we really need to learn and practice them over time. So that probably sounds familiar to many of you. We're talking about competency-based learning. So I'm not going to dig too deep into these core skills. I'll leave that for you to explore in the courses that we have for you. But just some of this you can probably relate to very closely: active listening, ability to ask questions, ability to think critically, to reflect on what we're learning, how we grow from that learning, and global communication, our ability to share externally about ourselves, tell our personal stories with the world, and also challenge other perspectives respectfully that we might hear that might come into contrast with our own values and stories. So that's really the skill set that we're looking to teach young people. And so it's quite a perfect match. If you haven't sort of started to see that already in some of the things we've spoken about with the IB learner profile. So some of those key characteristics, capabilities that are in the learner profile, like thinkers, who are knowledgeable, who are communicators, who are inquirers, who are reflective, who are open-minded. Well, that directly aligns to those core skills that we just showed you in the previous slide. So, of course, helping young people to think critically about the world and how they and others are part of it, helping them understand and explore global issues that connect us all through the content and the subjects we teach, helping them to develop dialogue skills to effectively communicate across diverse contexts, not just the one that we live in every day, helping them to ask meaningful questions, to create deep awareness and understanding of that content of ourselves and others, and to evaluate one's own personal growth and learning gained through the dialogue, through the experience of communicating and connecting with others. And then lastly, of course, being open-minded, willing to explore multiple perspectives, seek understanding of difference. So it's a really quite a beautiful match in the learner profile. Oh, sorry. So what might dialogue look like in the IB classroom? And what I wanted to do today is give you a couple of examples, some very top line examples of what dialogue might look like in action in a lesson plan or in a unit plan across the different three of the programs in the IB. So the first one I want to share with you is in PYP. And as we know, PYP is really creating a foundation, a program of inquiry, helping young people from go learn how to be critical thinkers, how to ask, how to inquire, how to create a deeper understanding, right? And so if we were to think about perhaps a teacher that's working maybe with dialogic reading, I imagine that some of you in PYP probably already use this strategy. We could look at a transdisciplinary theme such as how we express ourselves, and choose from that topic base for culture, beliefs, and values. And before we really get students engaged, we might want to do a skills building activity using global communication as the spotlight skill, where we're teaching young people how to share from the I perspective. Now, this relates beautifully to a book, and I wonder if some of you maybe have used this book before, perhaps fifth grade, I would say. Fourth to sixth grade is probably an ideal place for this book. It's called Amina's Voice by Henna Khan, and it's about a young Pakistani American girl who is struggling with sort of how does she fit in? And she's got lots of big questions about community and her name and what her name means. And should she consider maybe taking on a more Americanized name in order to feel more complete inside of her community? And so there's really big questions about identity in this book. So perhaps if you're using this book to explore self-expression, to explore culture, beliefs, and values in PYP, and you're helping young people build the skill of personal sharing, we have a great activity called Name Swap. That's what's in the corner here. It's a lesson plan. You can find it on the IB Exchange. And this brings young people into a dialogue about, what does my name mean? Who gave me my name? And so it really helps them to talk from the I perspective and explore this concept that Amina is exploring in this story. And we can partner that with dialogic questions that get young people in conversations about what are those traditions that are important to Amina's family, and how do they compare to the traditions that I have in my own family? Or how does Amina feel about her name and what it represents? Do you think that names are important to a person's identity? Why or why not? So these are dialogic approaches to how we can really use that dialogic pedagogy, that approach, to explore these themes in PYP, for example. Okay, and I realize this is very top line, so if there's any questions or any thoughts about any of this, if you want to put it in the Q&A, I'm happy for us to take a look at that toward the end. I'm just going to kind of keep going so everybody can get that understanding of how it might fit with the program that they're working with. So for the next one, which would be in middle years program, and a big part of middle years program is service as learning. And so we can think a little bit about, well, where does dialogic pedagogy fit there? So say perhaps we're operating in the global context of fairness and development. That's a theme that we're really focusing on. And the key concept that we want to dig into under fairness and development is civic participation. We're supporting students in that foundational knowledge about service as learning. We take an interdisciplinary approach. We work with individuals and societies and with the arts to come together on a project. And perhaps the thing that is decided is students will start to make personal connections to, civic participation, what they're passionate about, what they feel an interest towards, and design some campaign awareness posters on those particular topics. And we might say that the dialogic skill we really want to emphasize here is critical thinking. We want students to start thinking more deeply and critically about that information. So we're going to have students analyzing influences, what influences us, and what shapes our perspectives, our opinions. Now, Generation Global have great lesson plan. It's called What Influences Me. That's the one up in the corner that will really walk students through a process of inquiry that helps them dig into, well, what shapes my beliefs, what shapes my ideas, and to really make those connections. And so we can use a dialogue after students get familiar and start to understand what influences them and have a little bit more of that meta thinking. We can get them into a dialogue with each other to start identifying those personal connections. So, for example, what historical social movement do you think has impacted you the most today? So making those through lines between something that's happened in the past and how that still has an impact on who we are today. And why? Why do you think that particular movement has impacted you the most? And then we can ask them some more creative arts-based questions in the dialogue, like what kind of medium inspires you to act for social change and why? How does it address fairness, equality, or social change? So we can think about, posters, we can think about graffiti art, we can think about all these different mediums that are used to express social change and an idea. And so this is just one example of how MYP can really use dialogue as a foundation for a much bigger services learning experience. And I'm just going to go to the last one, last but not least, of course. And for this last one, focusing on DP, so the diploma program, and the CAS project, and how does that work? So this is a much wider well, so I tried to just kind of focus in on a topical example. So perhaps a key concept that a student or a group of students is looking at is around community wellness. There's a passion for that. They want to do a creativity and activity or a service project around community wellness. And the related concepts that they've been looking at in their subject areas are health, illness, and healing, or physical activity and health. And this might closely relate to social and cultural anthropology, and it also might relate to sports, exercise, and health as subject areas, course areas. And so before they're going to embark on any kind of project that really involves community, they need to understand how they can approach stakeholders that are invested in this issue, not just their own interest or their classmates, but members of a community who also are invested and are impacted by the issue of community wellness. So we really might want to prepare them using dialogue in questioning. How can they ask questions that are free from bias and assumption? If they're going to go into communities, if they're going to conduct interviews, instead of just interviewing, how can they really have an inclusive conversation with community stakeholders? So our activity, asking response questions, is a brilliant way to get young people prepared for asking good questions. So that you can find in the IB Exchange. And you can also get them into a dialogue to help them learn how and practice and feel what it's like to ask good questions around this issue. So What do you think are the barriers that prevent people from being healthy in your community? What experiences have you personally had? So making meaning. And what kind of service project could you both improve? You could improve your own personal well-being, but also benefit the health of the community. So looking for that mutuality, that mutual understanding. So this is just another way that dialogue can really strengthen that IB curriculum and response. So I'm going to stop there. I hope that these examples gave you some great ideas. I really want you to consider, and I'm not going to necessarily open this up. There's quite a few of us in this session right now, but I'd really love for you to consider what ideas you see for yourself in using dialogue in your learning community. I hope these examples have sparked inspiration and have you thinking, oh, I could do it like this. Obviously, you know your classrooms best, and I hope this has elicited some ideas, some curiosity for you in your own learning community. So the last question I just want to touch on is, how can you go further then? How can you take what we know dialogue is, the meaning of dialogue, why it's so important, some of these ideas that you're generating from these examples, and how can you really go further to bring dialogic pedagogy into your everyday, into your classroom? So there are 4 steps, if you will, that are really important in fostering dialogic pedagogy. And the first one is understanding and defining what dialogue is. So it's not enough for us to take a couple of poll questions together. It's really important that as educators, we have a thorough understanding and that we have a common definition about what dialogue is to work from, and that we bring that to our students so that we're all speaking the same language. We also need to make sure that we clarify and teach those skills objectives. So as I said, there is a very concrete set of skills we want students to be able to master. So making sure we know what those are, what those objectives look like, and we know how we can teach them in the classroom. From there, we need to know how to create safe, brave, and inclusive spaces before any dialogue can occur with our students. So this is essential. Without a safe, brave, and inclusive space, we cannot have dialogue. And then lastly, as educators, we need some of that didactic, some of that planning. So we need to know how we can build learning and practicing dialogue with intention. The intentionality is key. So what we have for you on the IB Exchange now are 4 courses that address these 4 key areas to really support you in bringing dialogic pedagogy to the classroom. And they're wonderful modules. They're digestible. They are pretty short and compact, but they give you such a rich body of information. So in the first, defining dialogue, you're looking at defining and differentiating the key distinctions of dialogue and how you can support students in understanding what dialogue is. In teaching skills, you're really able to analyze what those 5 core skills are and the objectives of those skills. There's a framework there for you to know and understand. And then you'll have access to all of those skills building activities that you can do in the classroom. In preparing dialogue, the 3rd module course, you have the ability to define what safe and brave spaces are, to identify the key elements for creating those spaces, and then actionable steps for co-creating inclusive common agreements. So you're ensuring that safe space. And then lastly, in integrating dialogue, you identify the themes and objectives in the curriculum that you're already teaching so you can make those alignments. So it's not an extra add-on thing. It's not co-curricular. It's the integration with your own curriculum. And you actually have an opportunity to develop a sequence of lessons and activities in that course. So this all exists on the IB Exchange. You have access to a skills building activities library. So some of those lesson plans I mentioned in the examples. There's also unit plans in the IB Exchange if you're teaching to the SDGs. And then of course, these 4 free professional development learning modules. Just giving you a little bit of a taste of what it looks like. Here's our lesson plan library, where you can go and select each of those lesson plans. And then this is where you would find the 4 courses that I mentioned. And then the last thing I'd like to do, if there's time, and I apologize, yes, I would like to just quickly show you what one of those professional development modules looks like, so you can kind of just see what's coming. So I'm just gonna stop sharing this screen for a moment. And I'm just gonna come over here.
And I just wanted to quickly say, Lisa, we have some questions in the chat about how and where to access this. You should have free access to IB Exchange through your MyIB credentials. If you don't, you can send a message to IB Exchange at ibo.org. But IB Exchange is open to almost every teacher, coordinator, head of school in the DP and PYP. We haven't yet launched MYP, but reach out to us because we're trying to find ways to get everybody in. We don't want to create any barriers to entry. So please reach out. If you're interested and you can't access it, we'll figure out a way to get you in.
Thank you, Laura. That's incredibly helpful. And I don't know if we can, oh, so you said go through MyIB. So there's no links necessarily that people need to follow.
Yeah, when you log on to MyIB, there will be a little button that says IB Exchange, and then you click on that and it'll take you directly in. So yeah, it's like the Program Resource Center, it's all in the MyIB portal.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So when you do go into that portal and you simply can just search Generation Global, I believe it's that simple. You can also look in cross-program resources, but you will find that Generation Global library of materials. So you'll find the lesson plans, and you'll also be able to find the 4 courses that were just mentioned. And if you select one of those courses, you'll find this similar design. So I'm just going to show you quickly a little bit of defining dialogue. So for each of those 4 courses, you'll come onto a landing page with the title. You'll know you're in the right place. It will give you a brief summary and the key objectives that you'll be learning from taking this particular module. If you select Let's Start, that'll bring you to the first stage, which is Activate. So it'll give you an opportunity to really reflect on what's coming in the course. We're doing this in lots of creative ways, so I promise it won't be boring. We have case studies, for example, that we're asking people to reflect on. So that's one way that we're engaging learners. So really trying to bring that to your classroom, to your environment. I'm going to hop around here because I don't want to show you every step of the course. But the second section that you will then move on to after Activate will be Learn. And here we'll have interactive videos for you to really unpack the concept, the main concept of the module that you're participating in. And then lots of interactive ways for you to engage with the content. So for example, this is just one, flip cards. There's a lot of other creative ways that we were able to create engagement for you in the different pieces of content. Also to mention that everything is accessible. There's transcripts for videos and for other kinds of content. And then lastly, as you go through, after you go through the Learn section, you will come upon the resources. So any resources that are mentioned in a module will be available for you to download directly in the course. No need to leave that. Or you also can go into the IB Exchange, the library for Generation Global, and peruse the activities and the unit plans that I mentioned. But any readings will be there. And then the last section that you'll go into is Apply and Grow. And this is where we really invite you to get into action. So there will be a small task takeaway that you can go and do with your students to really embody and sort of feel what it looks like to demonstrate, to put into practice the concepts that you learned from that module. So just something that you can go away with and the steps to do that. So I am going to stop there. I know that was a lot of information, and invite any questions that anyone has. And of course, Laura, to invite you if there's a possibility of sharing any more information about getting into the IB Exchange.
Yeah. So sorry guys, I lost my voice, so I sound a little gravelly. but I dropped a PDF in the chat that is how to update your MyIB credentials, so that you can get access. The way that we're doing access to IB Exchange right now is through the subjects that we've rolled out, the programs that we've rolled out. We've been like slowly launching. As you know, the IB is huge. So we have a lot of most of the DP in there. We have all the PYP in there. And then with the MYP enhancements coming, we're looking to sync up to launch MYP with that. We're trying to get MYP in there faster. And I've been listening to you guys that MYP feels very underrepresented. And I'm really trying to make the case that we need to get MYP in faster. So we're working on it, but use that document. You can maybe play around and be a little creative with your IB credentials and find a way to get in there, even if you're not explicitly listed on the subjects that we have launched currently. I'm going to show you, we just recently relaunched IB Exchange. So I'm going to show you what it looks like right now really quickly and show you how to find Generation Global resources on IB Exchange. Yeah, and just let me know. I think you guys can see my screen now. But let me know if you can't, Lisa.
Yes, we see it. Thanks,
And
Lauren.
I'm also letting people in through the waiting room too. So, okay. When you get to IB Exchange, it looks like this. It's very colorful. We have a search drop down here where you can search by the program level, or you can search by the subject group, and then you'll have subject. If you choose the sciences, you can drill down into different sciences here, and then you can go into the syllabus for the sciences too. To find Generation Global resources, I mean, the easiest thing to do is just to type Generation Global in here and hit apply. And you will see all of the, whoops, let me just make sure I clear my former searches. Okay. And then hit apply. And then you'll see tons of resources here. And these cards will take you into the content where you can preview. You'll get a little description. You can preview the content with this little drop down here. And then the pages will load the PDFs. You can preview it. You can download directly here. You can also, download it with this button here. And another way to search it, if you forget that it's Generation Global, you can just type in dialogue and hit the search. And then you'll also pull up, you'll pull up some things from, we got language B here. You'll pull up some other subject and program-based content. But Generation Global is all going to have the little Generation Global icon and be branded with this green. So you can see all of the resources here. You can also go into our communities. And, if you want to discuss some of these resources in our communities, we've got communities for every subject and program also launched here. So that's really quickly what it looks like to go into IB Exchange. Let me see if I can stop sharing. It's always the thing that is hardest to do. There we go. Yeah, and I had there was a question in the chat, is this open to non-IB teachers? Right now it's not, but eventually we'll be launching a premium subscription IB Exchange. All the materials that you've seen today and resources are free. In the spring, we'll launch a premium subscription where there will be some self-paced modules and micro-credentials that teachers can take that have currency within the teacher evaluation system. And some of those, just like you would pay for like a workshop, those will be premium. So there'll be a pay item that you can get through a premium subscription. We'll have more details about that in the spring. But for now, everything we're showing is free, and we'll still continue to have probably about 3/4 of the resources, if not more, in IB Exchange will be free and open to every IB educator. So that's like my really quick little spiel about IB Exchange, but feel free to drop a question in the chat or like raise your hand. And also if you want to ask questions for Lisa, like I said at the beginning, the Q&A tab is probably the easiest place for us to see the questions. The chat has a lot of things going on. And we will be sending the recording link and the resources shared in a follow-up email, as well as if you're registered for this event, just go to the Zoom Events Hub and you can stream the presentation there and you'll see the resources added there too. Okay, I see some questions coming up. Yeah. Is there any resource which you can share for how dialogue can be used in mathematics? Do you want to speak to that, Lisa?
Thank you. No, that's a brilliant question. The first thing I always say, because I recognize that math and sciences are so technical and it can be some of the most challenging subjects to use dialogue. However, it is possible. So a couple of things. The first thing I will say is context, context, context. Math without context is just numbers to some extent, right? We really need to have something applicable to life, some kind of case topic that you can apply those principles to so that it becomes relevant to young people and so that they can understand it. So the first suggestion I always make is the interdisciplinary, obviously, is partnering up with a social science course or English, language course, and really trying to find a way in which you can do that. One of the big examples that we love to give math teachers is around statistics. So, for example, the UN has the multidimensional poverty index, right? This is a massive body of statistical work around the world to look at how poverty exists. And so if you are working around statistics, if you're looking at values or at anything, inside of that, it's a great resource to help students get related to what those numbers mean, because those numbers are representative of people, of humans and human experiences. And so by using that as a lens to not only look at, okay, what are these numbers? What do they mean? And then look back at my own community and see where my community lies on the index and what does that mean for me? And how do I see that embodied in my community? What are physical examples that really demonstrate those numbers? I think that's a really solid piece of context to mirror math, but also get young people engaged in dialogue, engaged in conversations about, what is poverty? What is wealth? What does that mean? What does that look like? How is that applied to me? What are the personal stories that illustrate these numbers? And so I think that's a really just one way. And I realize that's only one faction of mathematics, but that's an example I give. And then the second thing that I would just mention is we have a webinar. If you go to Generation Global's YouTube channel, you can see all of the webinars that we've hosted independently. And we have a webinar that was offered in June that was about dialogue in the sciences. And so we have an instructor, Dr. Neil Phillipson, who has brilliantly integrated dialogue into science, and not just themes of climate change, which seem to be the most, obvious. And so I think that webinar is helpful for generating ideas about how math and sciences can sort of align the dialogic education. So I would suggest checking that out on our YouTube channel. Thanks.
And then I'm getting a lot of questions about sort of a certificate of attendance. We've been using the follow-up email that I send to all registrants as, thanking you for attendance and sharing the links. We've been using that as sort of a de facto certificate of attendance. So you can very easily forward this to your coordinator or head of school and show them that you're engaging in professional learning in addition to what you're doing in your school. So that's sort of what we've been using for now. I think eventually we'll have a better system, but we're kind of trying to have these events be really responsive and quick moving. So, we just want to keep rolling and keep having events for you. So please use that for now. And yeah, the link for the webinars, I'll grab it and pop it in the chat. We have a Zoom events hub that you can follow. We have a bunch of webinars coming up. We're about to launch a bunch more, one on artificial intelligence and academic honesty. So the ethics and the AI conundrum is something that we're planning for the future. And yeah, we'll send a link to everybody registered with the things we've talked about and the link to the recording. So I hope that helps explain that there. I had a question in the chat about how can we use dialogue in PSPE and PHE? I'm not totally sure what those acronyms are. I've only been with the IB for 4 years, so I'm still learning. Go ahead. I think somebody was helping me. If it's toward the PYP, which I know there's the program standards and practices, I think, Lisa, you had talked a little bit, the Generation Global resources, like really targeted to 13 and 17-year-olds, but they're easily adapted to the PYP. And Lisa had gone over some of those examples there too. I think we've answered all the questions. If you want to, before you leave in the chat, I'm gonna launch one more poll. We're just trying to get a sense of what sort of topics that you guys would like to see in future webinars, and then also just generally, if you've gone on to IB Exchange, what's your impression of it? What can we do better? You know, this is supposed to be for teachers by teachers. So we really rely on your feedback to constantly iterate on what we do and what we provide. And it's not, you know, unless it's helpful for you, you know, we shouldn't be doing it. So we want to keep making sure that you guys are our North Star, and we can do more events like this for free. So yeah, just take a second to answer this poll if you could. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing these great resources. Generation Global resources will always be free in IB Exchange. So that was another thing that's clarified by one of my colleagues. Thank you for that. And thank you all for your time today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation in the poll in the beginning and for, you know, your questions. And again, you know, if there's anything that comes up, I mean, feel
Can
free
I
to.
share your program op nummer 2
Yeah, go ahead.
en dan topics in the future IB Exchange events?
Yeah, I will share. So everybody will get an email after this event with a link to the recording and the materials. And then also I'll include a link to the Zoom Events Hub. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. Our Zoom Events Hub is where you want to go to see all future events that we have listed. And like I said, we're about to launch a bunch for November and December. So stay tuned there, but I'm going to drop it in the chat. Okay. Yeah, if you click on the link in the chat, you'll see we have one coming up. I think it's this week on teaching thinking with our esteemed TOK, Theory of Knowledge. Actually, it's next week. How can we teach thinking? And it's going to be presented by Will Everett, who is our community moderator for the Theory of Knowledge community in IB Exchange. So that's something that I think everybody will be interested in as application across the programs. So please join that. We've got 2 minutes left. I'll share my screen again. I know everybody loves to watch me figure out the technology. Okay, here we go. So this is our IB Exchange Events Hub. I dropped the link in the chat. Today we had the Generation Global event. Tomorrow we have supporting language and multilingualism in the PYP. And then next week we have how can we teach thinking. We have events coming up, a lot of events coming up around DP mathematics. We have an Ask Me Anything with our curriculum moderator, our curriculum manager and our community moderator on that. So they're talking about the curriculum review cycle for DP mathematics, and it's just an open forum for questions. We have a session on the IAA to support teachers. We have Festival of Hope session coming up with resources for the MYP. And then we also have upcoming events in DP mathematics. Let's see if I can scroll more around the paper 3, around supporting students in the paper 3 and supporting teachers in the paper 3. Sorry, slow scroll. Oh, we have a literacy session for language A, but really anybody who's looking at student choice in literacy, supporting students with the extended essay in mathematics. So just a lot of stuff going there. I really encourage you guys to subscribe to it and check it out and let us know what else you would like to see. Okay, I think we're 1 minute shy. Thank you, everyone. Look for the email later this week. And I hope you have a good rest of your day wherever you are in the world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you.